We are looking at quarterback tiers on today's Peacock and Williamson, courtesy of Mike Sando of The Athletic. How do coaches and executives around the league anonymously rank the NFL quarterbacks and tier them out? Coming up on today's Peacock and Williamson.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Shout out to all the everydayers subscribed up on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. All right. This is a fun one. We do this every year, Matt, and it is the quarterback tiers as done by Mike Sando, the great Mike Sando of The Athletic. And he surveys, I think it is 50 executives around the league, coaches and decision makers, and it's all anonymous so that he can get 100%. Like, as if it wasn't anonymous. And the anonymous scouts that happen around the NFL draft, you hear some wild takes. And I think sometimes people are surprised by even the top level decision makers around the league, what their takes are about current NFL quarterbacks. And that's not even the unknowns of draft prospects, because there's a lot of wild ones there. It's always fun just to get that. I don't love that it's anonymous, but it has to be anonymous so you get the unfettered quote, the real opinion of some of these guys.
100%. And, we know Mike's been on the podcast a fair amount. I know him quite well. Saw him at the owners meeting, consider him a friend. We've spent 10 years together at ESPN. And he did this going back to his ESPN days where he tallies all the votes, picks the best quotes. And you'll hear him, on podcasts and things all over the network, all over the internet, just talking about vibes he gets and things like that. And I think it's a blast. I think it's a good way of looking at it, tiering them, like, for example, but, and then there's also a voting average he shows here too, of like, you could see like the number one on the list. I'm sure people can figure it out. Got 0 votes for not being in tier 1. I mean, everyone that voted put Pat Mahomes in tier 1 as the top quarterback. I almost think he should have his own tier, to be honest with you.
It's getting closer and closer to being a Mahomes tier. And then let's talk about tier number 2, right? The number of quarterbacks in tier number 1 this year was, and look, the tiers are defined as the better equipped a quarterback is to win with less help around him, especially in situations when running the ball is not feasible, the better he will fare in the quarterback tier. So it's like you're winning because of the quarterback.
Yeah, exactly. Tier 1. That's tier 1. So you want to scroll through these? And I do think a conversation, it's more of an off-season thing, is do you pay a tier 3 guy? Anyone that gets a tier 1 guy, you're thrilled. You got a superhero, pay him whatever he wants. I think that's basically true for the tier 2 dudes as well. But is paying a tier 3 guy smart? I think that's a big conversation here.
Well, yeah, especially when you're talking about $40 million. If they're cheap and you're paying a high-level backup, okay. But if you're paying like franchise money, tier 2, tier 1 money to the tier 3 guy, I think we all know the answer to that one. Patrick Mahomes.
Like you and I would be thrilled if Pickett and Purdy are tier 3 guys this year, considering the investment in them. You know what I mean? That's great.
Right. Yeah. And then hopefully by the time you pay them, they're tier 2.
Right. And that's the fine line.
Or tier 1, right? Like Patrick Mahomes is clearly number 1. No surprise at all there. Here's where it starts to get a little bit surprising. I think this is the conversation a lot of people have is, okay, after Mahomes, is it Josh Allen or is it Joe Burrow? And I think it's become that conversation that those are clearly the top 3 guys. And the execs and the coaches around the league that were surveyed for this had Joe Burrow just ahead of Josh Allen at number 2.
Yeah, and I do think they're the only 2 fighting for the number 2 spot, in my opinion. And it looks like those voters agreed, because their average was both pretty high. I've gone back and forth on this all offseason. I think I prefer Allen, and there is a little bit of recency bias because of Burrow's injury that we talked about yesterday, that And I know Allen played through a pretty serious elbow injury for much of the end of last year. I just prefer the bigger, stronger guy, I think.
And we're seeing that with the recent injuries and the ongoing injuries for Joe Burrow. And Allen getting banged up as well, and then playing through an injury that was like, oh man, this is an elbow injury. This might cause somebody to be out for the year. And for Allen, he played through it and still played pretty well. I was a little bit surprised by this though. Only one tier 2 vote of the 50. It was 49 tier 1, 1 tier 2 vote for Joe Burrow. But there was 5 more there was 6 of the 50 that voted tier 2 on Josh Allen, man.
Yeah, I don't get that, to be honest with you. Like some of these other guys that are fringe tier 1, tier 2 guys, I could see is wavering, waffling a little bit. Maybe it's just because Mahomes is so great that I can't put anybody in the same tier as Mahomes, but the fact that Burrow got that fewer tier 1 or that fewer tier 2 votes kind of baffles me, to be honest with you.
I'm surprised that 50 out of 50 execs that was that high, that the number that voted tier 2 for Allen is the one that surprises me the most.
Yes, that you put that better.
Easily, I mean, you would just say, yeah, tier 1, of course, for all of course he's tier 1 to me, right? So to say tier 2 on Josh Allen, that's an interesting one there. That is very interesting.
I'd love to hear, which you never get because of the anonymous side of things, is why would you put him in 2 but you didn't put Burrow in 2?
I'll give you a quote here. There, 2 of them were defensive coordinators, by the way, that were among the 6 voters that placed him in tier 2. And one of the quotes, quote, "I'm not sure he can win you a game as a drop back passer consistently, which is part of the tier 1 description. I think Allen, Lamar, and Jalen all fit into that high tier 2 category. The running is a weapon, but if you are down 2 scores or 10 points, you might have an issue."
I don't agree. Defensive coordinators know more about football than I do, but my initial thoughts hearing that are that's the curmudgeon coach that just thinks these running quarterbacks don't throw the ball well enough.
And I think a little bit of a teaser for some surprises on this list potentially. And the first one, I think, is that number 4 on the entire list, tier 1 quarterback, is still the aging, now New York Jet, Aaron Rodgers.
I can't go there after last year and at his age. We've talked about him a lot. I mean, gave back $35 million. He sure seems bought in. I know they reference Brady going to the Bucs and compare that similarly. I understand that. I'm the next 3 guys I would put ahead of Rodgers after how he played last year.
And he was 30-20 in his tier 1 to tier 2 voting. Would you vote him tier 2 or tier 1?
Tier 2.
Okay.
By the definition, tier 2. Yeah.
It's interesting because Aaron Rodgers has been a tier 1 the whole time, and this is actually the lowest ranking he's had on this list. He's been number 1. He's been number 2. I don't know if he's ever even been number 3 on this list. He might have been 3, but 4 is the lowest going back to 2014 when Sando started doing these. And so there is some decline in his voting, but he's still tier 1 according to, over half of those polled.
I mean, I think he was 1 last year, right? I mean, it was him and Mahomes were fighting it out for number 1 last year. That
know what? Actually, now that I look at it, I think you're right. I think it might have been number 1 every year except for 2020. He was 2, and then he was back to 1-1 again, even ahead of Mahomes.
That's like when they drafted Jordan Love, right? Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, I get the respect, but he didn't play like that last year.
MVP award, so
yeah.
How about this one? Justin Herbert sneaks into tier 1, and he is the 5th and final quarterback in tier 1, Matt.
I get it. I mean, there's conversations about he hasn't won enough. They blew that lead. He would be my 4th quarterback, but my tough question would be, would I have voted him 1 or 2? Because those top 3 to me kind of stand alone. So maybe he'd be my very, 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 very best tier 2 guy.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do we go micro tiers where it's like Mahomes, and then it's Burrow and Allen, and then another gap, and then Rodgers, Herbert, and some of these next tier 2 guys all belong kind of together.
Yeah.
And for me, I would still go Aaron Rodgers, probably tier 1, because you haven't seen a physical decline. It's not like he can't sling it anymore. He looks like an old man, even though he's getting older. And Justin Herbert, with all the physical talent, it's just it hasn't all come together yet. So I would probably have Herbert in as a high 2, and Rodgers as the lowest one for me.
Okay, I get it. I mean, I understand that line of thinking. I mean, and you're right about Rodgers. It's not like end of career Breeze or Roethlisberger where they're just, falling apart.
Some listeners out there might be thinking, oh my gosh, okay, so there's this quarterback I have in my mind, and he must not be a tier one. You would be correct about that. We're not going to give you the details on every quarterback here. You're going to have to go check out Sando's article at The Athletic, but some of the biggest surprises, risers, fallers, and all of that coming up on the quarterback tiers next. Today's episode of Peacock and Williamson is brought to you by eBay Motors. Our partners at eBay Motors have teamed up with Locked On Fantasy Football host Vinny Iyer to bring you some of the best fantasy picks each week, all season long. Whether you're prepping for a draft, scouting the waiver wire mid-season, every week we're going to provide you with players that are guaranteed fits on your roster. So with draft prep underway for the upcoming season, let's see who Vinny has picked out for us in this week's eBay's Guaranteed Fit Fantasy Picks of the Week. And I know this is one of Matt Williamson's favorites, and that is running back Ramondre Stevenson. If you're looking to park an elite running back in your fantasy football garage, after the top half dozen options at the position or so are gone and taken off the board, there will be no sticker shock for the Patriots running back Ramondre Stevenson, a complete back in a run-focused Patriots offense. Stevenson has a huge advantage in getting the high leverage touches over other younger running backs. With eBay Guaranteed Fit and over 122 million parts and accessories for your vehicle right at your fingertips, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly, just like your fantasy football team. They've got air filters, brakes, batteries, taillights, alternators, shocks, struts. I went to eBay Motors and got myself a fender flare for my car. Ran over a parking cone on the freeway. I don't know what it was doing in my lane, but knocked off the fender flare. Had to get a new one. It was so easy. I had a guaranteed fit, green check, fits perfectly. I was able to save probably $1,000 from trying to take that thing in and get it fixed and get all that markup when I could just do it myself with eBay Motors. So go forth, switch gears, crank the AC, and say goodbye to sweating if your ride needs a little fixing up, because now you know you will always be set up for success from the get-go with eBay Guaranteed Fit. Everything your vehicle is calling for is just a click away. For the parts and accessories that fit your vehicle, just look for the green check. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. So, Matt, when it comes to tier twos, according to coaches and executives around the league, the top of tier two here is Jalen Hurts. And he made a meteoric rise from tier 4 to tier 3 and just almost nearly skipped tier 2 altogether. Comes in at number 6 overall. He had 10 tier 1 votes, 38 tier 2 votes, and still got 2 tier 3 votes.
I have no qualms at all with him being number 6 on the list. He would definitely be a tier 2 guy for sure. However, I kind of want to focus on the guy after him, but I do want to give Hurts his credit, because think about 1 year ago, the narrative around him was, man, they just got wiped out in the playoffs by the Buccaneers. They have 2 first-round picks that upcoming year. If Hurts flounders, they'll move up and get their quarterback. Well, he did anything but, of course.
Here's one quote from an exec or coach, not sure, around the league. And it's very similar. I don't know if it's the same defensive coordinator as the Josh Allen quote, but this is it. Quote, that is why I was so fascinated with the Super Bowl. If they do not call that pass interference on the Eagles, Kansas City kicks a field goal, and then we find out once and for all Jalen Hurts in the 2-minute situation, because the last time he was in one, and people forget this, they lost at home on Monday night. Washington didn't let him out of the pocket, and Philly did not win that game. So again, it's 2-minute situation. You're down. You are in the pocket. Can you throw your team to victory? Which is one of the big criteria, and that's why some of these graders, I think, have graded not harshly necessarily, but I think they're not super willing, unless they've seen it over time, for these quarterbacks to give you that year one, or that tier 1 nod.
Mm-hmm. And I get that. Some people are tougher graders. I can't quite give you the tier 1 nod. I understand Hurts not being in there. I understand Lamar, who's next, not being in there. But Lamar would be over Hurts for me. And here's my logic behind that is, let's just say Lamar got to play on the Eagles offense, and Hurts had to play in Baltimore, I think it would go noticeably worse. And I pulled up Warren Sharp's almanac, which is tremendous. I urge everyone to check it out. I've been reading it like crazy on vacation. And I just want to show a couple things about what the Ravens have not helped Lamar's life whatsoever. Because remember, up until this contract dispute, he was still on a rookie deal. So these are the wide receivers they've signed in the last 3 years in free agency: Sammy Watkins, Demarcus Robinson, Chris Moore. And then in season, they add old man Dez Bryant and old man Deshaun Jackson. And in the last 3 years, they've drafted Bateman, which might work out fine, Tylan Wallace, Devin Duvernay, and James Prochet. Those are the receivers they've given this guy without really jumping all in on a guy that was working on his rookie deal. And
they had the opportunity to go expensive at wide receiver if they have that rookie contract quarterback. And they never did that for Lamar. And we saw that with Hurts. We saw that with Josh Allen.
And then in total, in games Lamar has started and not gotten injured mid-game, and I understand there's some durability concerns, no doubt. The Ravens are 45-15 in those games. Only Mahomes has a better record in the same criteria. And 11 of the 15 losses by 1 score or less. I mean, so that's nuts. And 11 of those 15 losses, the Ravens gave up multi-score fourth quarter comebacks. So the defense is letting them down late in games. They're not giving them any receivers, and they're still 45-15 whenever he starts and finishes a game. It's pretty good.
I think some minor qualms from me with this list, and I would have Lamar ahead of Jalen Hurts. And I know Hurts had a better season last year, and they're back-to-back, and they're in the same tier. And I think they both belong right in this range. I'd probably have Lamar Jackson at the top of tier 2, and I'd probably have Lamar one spot ahead of the last quarterback in tier 1 here, and Justin Herbert, and then Hurts. That would be my 5, 7.
Yeah, I hear you. I think I'd still have Herbert over Lamar, but I'd love Lamar over Hurts. And I think I'd have all of them over Rodgers.
To be honest with you, I think Lawrence and Herbert are very similar. I know Herbert's been in the league a little longer, but I wouldn't fight you if you said you wanted Trevor Lawrence on your football team instead of Justin Herbert. There's still a lot of projection.
It's a good point. And you can't overlook the prospect he was coming out of Clemson and what he had to deal with as a rookie. But Lawrence is certainly climbing, and he would be probably 8 for me, but he could be 2 next year.
Yeah, and Lawrence at 8 in tier 2 here has jumped up in front of some big time names in Dak Prescott and Matthew Stafford to round out the top 10, and Deshaun Watson coming in at number 11.
Yeah, and Dak had a down year, too many turnovers, but fortunately for him, Brady retires. Stafford has a down year. Russell Wilson has a really down year. Some of the old guys that were ranked highly last year all went backwards.
I propose we talked about Patrick Mahomes having his own tier. If we were doing the micro tiers, tier 1, Mahomes, tier 2, Burrow and Allen, tier 3, everybody else we've mentioned so far, basically. And then the next tier would be also a micro tier of just one player, and that would be the Kirk Cousins tier. He comes in at the bottom of tier 2 in this survey, and he's been that like tier 2, tier 3 guy his whole career. And I think he has become that, you're the 12th best quarterback in the league. And if you got a quarterback better than Kirk Cousins, you're in great shape. If you don't have a quarterback as good as Kirk Cousins, you're filtering through quarterbacks.
I like the way you said that, because I was going to say it similarly, in that Kirk Cousins to me is the poster boy for a tier 3 quarterback, but is the best of them. He is the number 1 tier 3 quarterback year after year after year. And back to the original conversation, do you pay that guy $40 million? Are you better off or just using the 20th pick in the draft on one instead and building around them?
I propose that Mike Sando, sorry to interrupt you. I propose Mike Sando interview 51 guys next year, because it would have broken the tie, because I didn't realize this until I just clicked on it. And this is a fantastic article. Seeing all the quotes, you got to go check out all of Sando's work at The Athletic. 25 tier 2 votes, 25 tier 3 votes.
That's awesome. Or 49 would be fine. It's some odd number, right? And I get it. He's the worst tier 2 guy ever, or the best tier 3 guy ever. and I would put him in as tier 3, but he'd be my 12th guy too.
Staying on Cousins, have you seen the quarterbacks documentary show on Netflix? It's fantastic. I haven't finished it yet. I've got one more episode, but you cannot come away not being a fan of Kirk Cousins.
Absolutely. I mean, good guy for sure, all that stuff. It's a great series. I may even mention this a couple weeks ago. It's been a while. But a friend of mine, when you see the credits, it's Peyton Manning. And then the next name that's a credit is Keith Cosgrove, who's a year younger than me from high school. Really good dude. He's been at NFL Films for a long time. I should probably text him, see if he wants to come on.
Got to get him on the show. Yeah, you did mention that before, and I'd forgotten about it. We got to get Keith Cosgrove on this show. I would love to see hear some behind the scenes from that production.
Yeah, very cool. And I think there's going to be a next year one too. I think it's going to be a yearly thing.
And here's another thing that I came away with. And look, I don't think they were unfair or anything with the storytelling, which they could be, because, you can pick and choose what to display when you're presenting a story like this. Mm-hmm. But when you watch Kirk Cousins and his process, and then you watch Marcus Mariota and his process, it was pretty clear and pretty easy to see how those guys are wired differently, and why maybe a more physically talented Mariota hasn't had as good of a career as the less physically talented Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I didn't think Mariota was a slacker compared to the other two, but he's a little more laid back and a little more Hawaiian. I don't mean that in a negative way. Folks from Hawaii, I mean, you're wonderful people, but just kind of beachy and, chill. And Cousins is stressful and worries about things. And
grinding every second.
Right.
I didn't get close enough. I need 2 more yards so we can make this field goal. It's just like everything's grinding. He's doing the brainwave thing in the car.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild what you have to go through as an NFL quarterback.
It really is. And the beating he takes, and the right rib cage, and there's another helmet right to the rib cage again. And that's what they all deal with.
All right. More from the Sando tiers, some of the biggest risers, fallers, surprises from tier 3 and 4 next. Thanks again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you are subscribed up and become an everydayer if you are not on YouTube and everywhere you get your podcasts. What are your biggest surprises here in tier 3, Matt? And it's a large tier going from quarterback 13 all the way to quarterback 23 in the NFL coming into 2023.
Yeah, surprises. I don't know. I mean, I don't envy anyone for having to rank Kyler Murray. I mean, he's at the top of this tier. I think that's legit. If he gets out of Arizona or a new regime there, I think he'll probably settle in tier 2 for his career. Russell Wilson, I mean, had a miserable season. I don't him either. I mean, not that there's any shocks here. It's just I don't envy some of these guys of where I would place a couple of these quarterbacks. And then I go to Mac Jones and think he's more Purdy Pickett land to me than he is, even Tannehill, Geno Smith land.
Yeah, and I 100% agree, and not much separated them. Mac Jones was the final quarterback, 23 overall in tier 3, and Brock Purdy and Kenny Pickett were 24 and 25 at the beginning of tier 4. I don't know that Mac Jones has shown anything more than those guys in the NFL, especially with what we saw at the end of the year for Brock Purdy there. And I do believe of all the players in this tier, I would put Mac Jones in the next tier down.
Yeah.
Because we need to see a big year from him. He might not be a starting quarterback. So to say he's one of the 23 best, and if it goes poorly, he's not an NFL starter after this year. I'd put money that Purdy and Pickett are starters in 2024 over Mac Jones, probably.
Me too. I was going to ask you this question, and I do understand Mac Jones had a lot of things going against him last year.
No doubt.
But he also doesn't move particularly well. I would not trade my guy, Pickett, for Jones. Would you trade your guy for Jones?
No.
Yeah, I wouldn't. No.
I probably wouldn't trade the other guy, Trey Lance, for Jones either.
Okay, fair enough. Right.
Yeah, because you got the upside factor.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, if I was, I don't know, the Vikings, and I had to go get Mac Jones or Lance, I would probably rather pay money for Lance. I'd probably give you more for Lance. You know what I mean?
On that same note, how about this one drafted in that same class? 2 slots ahead of Mac Jones is Justin Fields at 21. Very different, right? but I feel like the trajectories are way off, and I feel like there's a bigger gap, which is why I think Jones belongs in a different tier than Fields and Tannehill and even Geno Smith from what we saw last year and the Cars of the world.
Yes, I don't disagree at all.
I was interested to see with Justin Fields because, listening to some of the quotes from some of the, especially the hardened old school veteran executives and defensive coordinators around the league, where they would rank someone like Justin Fields, who has so much work to do as an in the pocket timing and rhythm passer, which is what the league has been based on, for so long and still continues to be. But just seeing how, man, it doesn't take a lot to squint and see, yeah, he's right in that same place that Jalen Hurts was the year before. And Josh Allen was after his second year in the NFL. And I was kind of surprised in two ways. One, that there was 5 of the 50 that gave Justin Fields a tier 2 vote, which means they had him 10 slots higher than where he ended up. Mostly he was a tier 3 guy, 34 votes there. And then 11 of the 50 had him voted as tier 4. So people were completely split on Justin Fields.
Which makes all the sense in the world. Like, I don't put a lot of stock in that NFL Network top 100 list, but he was on it and I was kind of blown away by that. But he's definitely hard to play against. I mean, I don't think that anyone can combat that, whether you're a Fields fan or not. I think you and I are Fields believers, and that goes back to watching him at Ohio State and as a draft prospect. I think he's a good passer. We just haven't seen it, and he has a lot of work to do. But what about Justin Fields versus Daniel Jones? Like, who would you rather play against?
I was going to bring that up. So
yeah.
Justin Fields comes in at 21. And if I'm thinking, who do I want to play against, or who do I want as my quarterback going into 2023, which is his year 3 now with some of the weapons he actually has, which is legit instead of what he was dealing with his first couple of years. To me, Justin Fields is one of the easiest evaluations on the list because I know exactly what he has and what he needs to fix. And you see it in some of the quotes here, talking about timing and in the pocket. And but his because it's like people talk about his accuracy. His accuracy is not the problem. He throws. He makes elite throws every single game. He's got deep ball accuracy. He's an accurate thrower. Arm talent is there. His athleticism and running ability is there. It's the quick game stuff. Can he get his feet lined up? Can he get the ball out? Is he just not a quick enough processor for that aspect of the NFL? Get the ball out middle of the field, which is usually the easiest thing. That's what so a lot of the quarterbacks get first, and they don't have the ability to do the other things that Justin Fields can do with the downfield throws and running of the football. But all that said, even with his shortcomings, I would think that would be the teachable part of playing quarterback. And maybe he does. I just think he's smart enough. I think he can do all those things. I would much rather take that than the guys in front of him. 20, Geno Smith, 19, Daniel Jones, 18, Jimmy Garoppolo. Then you start getting to Tua, Russell Wilson, Jared Goff, Derek Carr. That's the end of, and Kyler Murray, end of tier 3. I mean, Kyler Murray and Justin Fields almost is a toss-up to me.
Yeah, and I think Murray's a very, very good passer, too. That doesn't always get credit for that. Like Murray, Fields has had to overcome his situation a lot. Those first 2 years and with the Bears, at least the beginning of last year, were really rough. And I think the great comparisons, the one you made, is Fields is pretty much at the same stage of his career as Hurts was a year ago, except the Eagles a year ago or 2 years ago went to the playoffs, and Fields' team ended up with the first pick in the draft.
The rookie starters are not on this list, Matt, but of those 30 quarterbacks that do make the tiers and the rest of these guys in tier 4, do you have any big thoughts on any of these players here before we go out?
I wonder how Sando set this up. Does he give them 30 names and they go 1, 2, 3, 4 next to all of them? Or does he say, give me your top 30 or whatever? Because there's only 30 on this list.
I think he gives them the names and says, okay, here, give the tiers next to these guys. Or he might give them more, but I know, they all, because it's starters, not counting the rookies, which is why we end up with 30.
Okay. So it's not 30 every year. He probably gives them the names, because frankly, I was a little shocked that Mayfield's even a top 30 quarterback anymore. and he's at 26.
Right, because I would take Stroud, right? Or
of course, right.
Bryce Young, but they didn't qualify for the list because you need a year first before they're going to give you that opportunity. And to be honest with you, I'd take Desmond Ridder and Sam Howell, maybe.
I would too.
Who are on this list. And how about this one? They put Gardner Minshew on the list, and I don't think he is the starter. I think he should be 29 quarterbacks and not 30.
Yeah, good point. Like what I was going to say about Mayfield is I really don't know that he's any different whatsoever than Trubisky or Wentz or Mariota. And what I mean by that is like a top 3 pick that didn't live up to it. I mean, I think Mayfield's the same guy as them.
Ritter's interesting. Gardner Minshew should be a tier 5 guy to me. And so there's only 4 tiers. So that's where, I think if you gave them the option of a 5th tier, would Sam Howell be in the 5th tier? Would Gardner Minshew be? And actually, I take that back. There is a 5th tier.
Okay.
With this right here, there is a 5th tier option, and they did give out some 5th tier votes, but these are the only guys that made it into the tier 4 of the voting. Man, the league really likes Sam Howell and Gardner Minshew. So
yeah, I just clicked on Howell, and he's got 47 tier 1 or tier 4 votes, only 2 for tier 5, and only 1 for tier 1 or for tier 3.
That's interesting, and more than Desmond Ridder, who was drafted higher and had an opportunity to show more last year.
Yeah, that is interesting to me. I mean, maybe neither one of those guys ever does anything, but I have a hunch Howell sticks.
Very interesting. Find out all of the details, all of the quotes from all of these tiered out quarterbacks done by Mike Sando. Always a must-read article every single year from Sando of The Athletic. And thank you once again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Make sure you get those mailbag questions in later in the week at BD Peacock, at Williamson NFL, or on the YouTube comments. Subscribe up, thumbs up, hit the notification bell so you know when we go live for that Thursday mailbag. Talk to you then right here, Peacock and Williamson.